Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time on your Tuesday to join us for our 2025 Insight Update. I'm going to try to make this as fun as possible for you. If you've been on my webinars before, if you've been with us for a while and you've heard a previous legal update, there are a lot of things that are coming at us, right? New laws in pretty much every state. Change in leadership at the federal level yesterday, a lot of curveballs coming, a lot of things that we need to be aware of. I try my best to break that all down and give you, practical advice and guidance as to next steps and how you might be able to stay out ahead, right? I'm not going to sit here and just regurgitate the laws. We have this presentation is recorded. You'll be able to get a copy of all the documents. You can always reach out to our HR services inbox. We'll put that at the very end with specific questions. But the role that I'm lucky enough to fill here at PayEntry, I get to work with all of our tremendous clients nationwide. One employee, thousands of employees, all different industries, and kind of having those conversations and trying to hear about some of the struggles and some of the next steps and some of the issues that have come up. We try to do our best here to be able to take these things and give you those practical solutions and how we can possibly support you moving forward to eliminate a lot of this red tape. And for the most part, a lot of these issues that arise can be prevented, right, with proactive maintenance, and that's what we're all about. So moving forward here, quickly, PayEntry is not a law firm. The presentation is intended for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon in reaching a conclusion in a particular area of law. The applicability of the legal principles that we discussed today are definitely going to differ depending on your individual situation. What state are you in? How many employees do you have? What type of industry? So I'm going to speak in general terms. We're going to cover some federal law, some California. There's some other things that I wanted to talk about today as well. So if you hear some things and you're kind of concerned, does this apply? Does it not? Just send us an email and we'll be glad to connect with you offline and help you walk through your individual situation. Okay. Receipt of this or any other PayEntry presentation does not create attorney-client relationship, and PayEntry is not responsible for any inadvertent errors that may have been put into this presentation during the publishing process. The agenda for today, we're going to talk about some updates here in the great state of California. There are plenty. Michigan, not only one of the two teams to beat Ohio State this year, but we also have now this Earned Sick Time Act. This is a fun one, right? I know that this is very new to you in Michigan, so we'll talk about that and I'll give you some feedback. On the federal level, there was a lot of talk about some changes to the overtime exemption or the FLSA. That did not happen, so we'll talk about what that means and what we need to pay attention to moving forward. Pay transparency and reporting, that is a federal law, and there are a handful of states that also have pay transparency requirements. Remote work policies. Over the past year, I would say the overwhelming majority of the client issues that I got involved with arose out of poor remote work policies or zero remote work policies. We'll talk about that and how to do a better job. 2025 HR compliance calendar, just giving you some tips as to how we might be able to support you and help make this easy, some guidelines and best practices, and then we'll shut down a few minutes early, about 55 minutes in, so that anybody that has any specific questions can come online and ask questions. Okay. In California, one of the biggest changes that was made now heading into 2025, there is a new law expanding the definition of race, which includes traits historically associated with hairstyles and et cetera. Okay. What you need to know is in California, again, this is maybe I think the 7th year in a row that there have been changes to protected class information and anti-discrimination policies. the changes that that continue to be made by the Department of Civil Rights here in California mean that it's going to require a handbook update to make sure that your list of factors includes everything that they continue to add. Okay, and again, harassment training. Okay, if you're in California, I know Connecticut's another one. Most states do not have a requirement when it comes to harassment prevention training, but that doesn't mean that it's not strongly recommended. Okay, we have access here at Pay Entry to basic harassment prevention training. Even though it might not be a requirement for your specific state or your specific business, it's a great practice to implement. A lot of these, some of them are free trainings, some of them are very, very inexpensive, but to add that into a new hire type of orientation to where they come in and you're welcoming them into your organization, and as a part of that, they sit down for an hour and they go through trainings. I think this will be very, very helpful for your organization. And again, this is based on where the employees live. Okay, I've had it happen, over the last few months. Well, Brett, we're headquartered in Texas. Okay, but you have 2 employees in California, so those employees in California need to go through the California protocol, right? When we're talking about the sick pay and some of these other things. So we need to be aware of what the requirements are for our company as we continue to grow. Okay. And then again, what's going to happen is that in that example I just gave you, if you are headquartered in Texas or Arizona, it doesn't matter which state, but you have employees, if those employees that are in California are interacting with employees that are in your headquarter location, right, and something is said or done, or a supervisor thinks that this is a funny joke, I'm gonna say something like this to an employee, we have issues, right? We end up getting into hot water inadvertently just because we forgot that that we needed to add in some of these extra layers depending on where the employees are located, right? So just keep that in mind. Make sure that your workplace discrimination policies are continuing to be updated, whether it's California or any state, where they make the changes. Handbook, refresh the harassment training. The ones that we offer here through Pay Entry are always refreshed and up to date. I have seen situations to where, you can buy some online. I had somebody, a few years ago, well, we bought the set of DVDs, from Staples, and that was our training curriculum. Those things are dated, right? So if you bought something and it hasn't been freshened up, you're probably going to want to look at that because it's going to be void, right? If there is an issue, there's a harassment claim, and you don't have the up-to-date policies, a judge is going to void the entire handbook, and your training materials are going to be thrown out as well. So you're going to have a hard time defending a claim if you don't have correct documents and up-to-date training materials. Okay. Another thing here in California, and I think those of you that are not in California probably see this and go, what the heck is going on out there, guys? I agree with you. There's always something. But to be frank, what usually happens is we start seeing things out here, and with time, it starts heading east. How far east is the question, but there are a lot of things that we've been dealing with for a long time that are just now rearing their head. And then the Michigan sick pay is one of those. That's been the law in California for 10 years now, and it's just now, affecting almost every other state. California employers are required to undergo regular social compliance audits. These audits assess compliance with labor laws, health and safety regulations, employee right protections. Stripping this down, what does this mean? Okay, what this means is, right, the state of California is tired of employers getting themselves sued, walking into court, and throwing their hands up and saying, hey, we didn't know this was the law. We didn't know that we had to go through all these things. We're honest people. We're trying to comply. California says no. Okay, there are plenty of providers, resources, such as the Pay Entry HR team, that are available to be able to help you. Okay. You could pay, we'll use a nice round number, right? You could have paid pay entry $10 a month for HR services, and Brett and team could have helped you put a new handbook in place, access to free training through the state of California, put all these controls, right, and complaint procedures. And they could have built this force field around your organization, right? But you chose not to do that. And therefore you have, rampant harassment, you have wage and hour violations because maybe you're still, tracking time by hand. And there's just no excuse for it anymore in California. That's the state's stance, right? That's why a few years ago they stiffened the penalties for wage theft, right? If you don't use timekeeping and you have a violation and you maybe calculated something wrong when it came to overtime, or an employee missed a meal period and they didn't tell you and we didn't pay a meal penalty, right? Wage theft. And a $5 mistake turns into $2,500 worth of penalties and interest, right? So that's the landscape here. So if you're in California and you don't utilize any of our HR support services, we really need to have a conversation. They're not very expensive at all. We have different levels for different people, but this is what we do all day long, are these HR, compliance audits. They've just added in a couple of other things to what we're talking about. Obviously the labor code, OSHA, workplace violence prevention plans, basic safety, and then just, employee right protections. That all kind of goes around, pay equity and education of your supervisors to make sure that, everybody's, knows what the rules are, knows what we can and can't do anymore, right? And if there are issues in your workplace, these employees, these supervisors know that there's a channel to be able to communicate with HR or leadership, so we can engage and we can talk through these things and address them immediately before they kind of fester and spill out of control. It was Assembly Bill 3234. If you want to look it up, again, I'm not going to get in here and read through all of the nuts and bolts of the piece of legislation, but publishing audit results on your website, I'm not sure about that just yet. And again, what's going to happen with all of these, new pieces of legislation, it's going to be probably 3 to 6 months before we hear about, next steps. It's going to take somebody getting sued and then, this to be litigated, and we'll figure out like, we should have done this and we should have done that. I mean, my guidance now for our clients is audit, absolutely, right? Let's go through the audit. Let's dig in. Let's really, issue spot and flesh out anything that we may or may not need to address. And then from there, let's talk through how to put a timeline together, right? A 6-month, 12-month timeline of how to, go through these and an order of risk and potential legal exposure. We can clean this up. We can address this. We can address this. We can address this. And let's have all of that ready. I'm not really sure how I feel about publishing something on your, company's website just yet. But again, in subsequent webinars, as I start hearing more and more about what this looks like, whether it's next month in February or in March on the webinar that we have, I'll make sure to chime in and give everyone an update so you can see how these things are trending. And again, even if you're not in California, this is still a very, very good business practice. I would say on average per week, we are going through almost one a day, maybe 4 a week on average with our clients in all different states. Just last week, we had, Maryland, Kansas, Michigan, Indiana, right? So, even though those states are not telling you have to do this and you have to publish, it's always a good idea to kind of jump in and see where you're at, okay? Our team is very, very well versed in obviously legal compliance, as well as the HR specific rules in all 50 states. And it's a good conversation. Hey, Brett, we've been in business for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Yeah, it's been a while since we've had somebody really, come in and pull back the covers to figure out what we've got going on. I think it would be good. I think it would be good to spend a few hours together and pull this all back so we can get an honest assessment as to what have we got right now that's working for us, that's we're doing well. What do we have that might be changing? We may have heard through the grapevine that some changes in the laws are coming, whether it's on the federal level or your state specifically. Or hey, these are the things that you're doing great. You're doing a good job. It's legal compliance, yes, but it's also the soft skill HR side of things. When we're going through these audits, whether it's social compliance audits or just HR in general, there are a lot of things, and I'll just kind of, as we move on here, talking about job postings, I'll give you a little sneak peek as to one of the things that we talk about in these audits, right? I would say over the last few months, one of the biggest, or I shouldn't say biggest, the most frequent complaints or gripes that I've heard is, Brett, oh man, I'm using Indeed. I use LinkedIn. I'm paying them the $100 a month or whatever they're asking for to try to get me some better candidates. But man, a lot of the resumes I'm getting are just junk. Okay, it's not good. Right? I guess I open it up and I've got like 60 people in there and I'm weeding through and it's just a lot of just junk. It's really, I'm having a hard time finding solid candidates. Right? That's one of the things that we address during these audits, and that's one of the areas of expertise that we have from the HR side and the behavioral side, is how to freshen things up, right? Make things look nice and make yourselves more attractive without having to spend all the money on Indeed or LinkedIn or whichever other job board that you might be using. Okay. California now has this new rule that we should not ask about driver's license. And I think this is a good rule in general, right? California, it's in, big red letters, but in general, we should refrain from asking about protected class information during the hiring process, okay, until an offer is made. There's no need for it, because what's going to happen here, and it's already happened in California, but I'm telling you right now, it will happen. It can happen in all 50 states, okay, that if you have something on a job application, if you're asking for a date of birth, right? We shouldn't do that for obvious reasons. If you're saying, hey, we want to know your job, your driver's license, okay, information, and that job does not involve driving, then what's going to happen is you're giving somebody the opportunity to build a case against you for some type of discriminatory hiring practices. Okay. I applied for this job, at Brett's restaurant. I was supposed to be a host. I was going to stand at the front of the restaurant and take reservations and be a host. They asked me for my driver's license. I don't have one, right? The reason why I don't have one is because I have a cognitive disability, and the state of Illinois will not issue me a driver's license because I can't pass their requirements. And I can't be behind the wheel. And now I'm going to sue Brett's restaurant because there's no reason why, I couldn't have a parent drop me off at work, or I couldn't get an Uber to work every day. I can be a great host at your restaurant. I just can't drive. And you led me to believe that I wasn't going to be able to get this job because I don't have a driver's license. You think it's crazy? It's not crazy, guys. I've sat in a deposition where that was the exact fact pattern. Right, and the employer had to pay because it's just it was an honest mistake, but California is clearly on overboard compared to a lot of the other states, but it's just good business practices, and these are the things that we go through in these audits. You know what, you don't need it, right? Obviously, if you're going to make an offer to somebody and they have to have a driver's license, then we're going to get all that information. We're going to ask them to consent to a background check or a DMV, type of a record request, so we can make sure that they have all of the credentials needed to work for us. It's the timing. The timing of it is what's most important. The order of operations, right? We're not asking for it now. We're going to wait a little bit and then we'll ask for it then, okay? But still building in a contingency process and making it very clear so that they know that, hey, in order to be actually hired for this role, You have to pass the background check. The motor vehicle report has to come back clean. You have to have the valid license. Okay, so we're all on the same page, because if there are any hiccups, then what we're doing is revoking that offer and going back to a different candidate. Okay. Make sure that your postings are compliant, only requesting necessary documentation. So obviously in California, that means we're not asking about any prior conviction history, right? We're not asking about any wages. We are going to post wages instead. And this has been the law for the last few years. And those of you that have worked with me or the team here at Pay Entry, that's our recommendation. On your posting, right, take the elephant out of the room, right? We're in Nebraska. This is a construction job, and it pays between $18 and $20 an hour, period. Okay? Because what's going to happen is if you put that out there and a candidate is not willing to work for that, then they're not going to apply. We're trying to get rid of is all these people applying, and you think, man, I found this employee Lorena, and she's great, and I'm gonna bring, and then we get all the way to the end, and they're like, well, oh man, 18, I need 30. We can't afford 30. Now we just wasted weeks going through this process when we could have, nipped that in the bud immediately, right? So it's always best practice, especially on the federal level. We're talking about fair pay, building that pay range, and making sure that everything is fully transparent and clear. We're an equal opportunity employer. Okay. This is the role that we're hiring for. Here's the wage range, all of the fun stuff. Put the logo on there, put some photos so that it's attractive, and you'll start getting in front of more qualified candidates that way. Again, just to recap, right? The audit, we've talked about that. There are a lot of moving pieces. I'm sure that we're going to keep they'll issue an FAQ probably in the next few weeks to give us more info. So on next month's webinar, I'll kind of circle back to this and add some color to see how things have kind of changed. Make sure that you're working with us. Whether you have your own HR team internally, whether you have outside legal counsel that you rely on. This is the law now in California. Make sure that you're asking those questions. We are also here at Pay Entry equipped to help you through this audit process and make recommendations. Okay. Moving on to Michigan. This is coming February 21st. So we have about 6 weeks before this actually goes live. But this is another one. Over the past few weeks, a lot of people have been calling, been emailing. What do we do? How do we manage this? We're all over it. Okay. If you have questions, if you have concerns as to how to implement this, please just reach out. You can schedule time to speak with our HR team, and we'll kind of give you our 2 cents. If you need help drafting the policies and educating your team, your managers, supervisors, absolutely. We'd love to be able to help you implement this. But just kind of a brief overview, okay? This applies to all employers, okay? All employers in Michigan with at least 1 employee, okay? Doesn't matter if they're hourly employees, if they're salary employees, doesn't matter if it's full-time or part-time. The only carve out would be you government employees, right? If you work for the federal government, okay, then they have their own policy. But any private employment in Michigan is going to be under this ESTA, they call it. Okay. The first question I get, well, I only have 1 employee. I'm just a small business. This doesn't apply to me. Yes, it does. It applies to absolutely everyone. Okay. There's an accrual setup, right? The employees will accrue sick time at the rate of 1 hour for every 30. This is identical to pretty much every other sick policy nationwide, right? Those of us in California, like I said, we've been dealing with this for 10 years already. Illinois, Nevada, Colorado, there are New York. Pretty much every sick policy that's come out over the last 10 years, the basics are the same. Okay, the framework is identical. There are just a few other, some of them have different calculations or different caps, but the Michigan is no different than any of the other ones that we've seen. Okay, so we set it up in payroll as an accrual. You earn 1 hour of sick for every 30 that you work. Okay, if you have fewer than 10 employees, you must allow at least 40 hours annually. And if you have 10 or more, then you have to allow at least 72 hours. Okay, so that's the unique piece to Michigan's. Most other states don't have that. It's just the 1 hour for 30, and then there's a small rollover. But Michigan is putting in some different guidelines depending if you have 10 or more employees. Okay. If it's unused, right, just like every other policy, if it's unused, it has to be carried over, okay? But we can limit that use to no more than 72, okay? So in general, you're going to ask, well, help me unpack this, Brett. What does this really mean? I already have a vacation policy. Do I really need to offer sick? The answer is yes. So here's kind of my 2-minute overview on all of these sick policies, not just Michigan included. Okay, but this is another very common conversation that we have with our HR clients. Okay, there's a lot of frustration. All right, I'm very generous, man. I offer insurance. I pay a lot for insurance. Okay, I offer vacation. Right, we have a very, very good vacation policy. Okay, now I have to offer 5 days, 40 hours, or now 72 hours of sick. That's absurd. Okay, I can't, 8 days, 5 days, like this is too much. Well, personally, I agree. I understand, that, enough is enough and that there needs to be a limit. But the way that the states look at it is that, health benefits are not a requirement unless you have more than 50 employees. Okay, that's a federal law. Vacation, there's no state that has a requirement that you have to offer vacation or you have to offer paid holidays or you have to offer these other things, right? Um, this now sick time is mandatory, but it is not a vested benefit. It's not compensable, right? So in some states, to where if upon separation, whether an employee quits or an employee resigns, California is one of them. There are a few others to where if there's unused vacation, it has to be paid out immediately. Sick time is never compensable. Okay, so if an employee quits, they don't get cashed out their sick time. If we have to fire them, we don't pay out any sick time. And that's across the board. Doesn't matter what state that you're in. Okay, the sick policies are drafted to be a don't ask, don't tell type of a policy to protect the employee, right, from overzealous employers and to give them some basic, privacy rights on dealing with issues that may, arise for themselves or for their immediate family, right? I've got my children are sick. I've got, elderly parents that I'm their sole caregiver and I'm the only one that takes them to their appointments, right? Personally, I'm sick, etc., right? They don't want employees calling, hey, I don't feel well. Well, you better be here because if you don't show up to work today, you're getting fired, right? They don't want people to be put in those situations, and that's where all these sick policy, pieces of legislation are arising out of. Okay, my advice to you would be to keep these separate. Okay, whether or not you make a determination internally that you need to maybe trim down on some other benefits. If Michigan is telling me I need to offer a whole now week of sick, I'm going to have to take a week away from vacation. Well, that might be a decision that you have to make. Okay, it's not a decision that I would make lightly. I think it sends the wrong message to your employees, but I get it. If it's purely a financial decision and the money needs to come from somewhere, and we need to look at maybe reducing some of the benefit contributions or reducing some the paid holidays or vacation, so be it. But I personally, I'm not a fan of policies where you bundle everything together. Some of the states, Michigan included, will allow you to just grandfather in a policy if you've had vacation. You can say, well, it's all just wrapped into my vacation. I have up to 8 days. It can be vacation, it can be sick, so on and so forth. Possible. I don't like it, and I'll tell you why. I don't like it because I believe in my personal, experience and here at Pay Entry and working with our clients, you lose the leverage as the employer. You lose leverage, right? Your vacation policy should be, right? We will give you a week, but there should be very strict request process around your vacation. Okay. It should be, you need to request it 2 weeks in advance. It needs to go to your manager or it needs to go to HR, and we reserve the right to reject if necessary, right? So if it's Friday and we're swamped on Fridays, we've got, our calendar is full with customer appointments. I'm not giving you Friday off. I need all hands on deck. Okay. But the great news, I can give you Thursday off, or you can take Monday, or maybe next Friday. Now that you give me enough notice, we can work our schedule around, right? But that's how vacation should work. It shouldn't just be this last minute, hey, I'm not coming in today, just burn my vacation. No, right? We need to be able to make sure that it kind of fits with our operation. And, that's your right as the employer, because you don't have to offer it. You can put these controls in, right? It could be maybe by department. Hey, you know what? Here at Pay Entry, our customer service team, we have 50 customer service employees, right? In order to really, really operate at where we want to deliver the excellent level of service, we need to have 45 people in that department at all times. Okay, so the customer service managers know there can't be more than 5 people off at once. And that's fine. You might have a smaller organization, but you can put those controls in. Hey, we need at least 2 drivers at all times, 3 servers, 5 sales reps, right? And then that way everybody knows that, hey, if you look at the vacation calendar and a sales rep has already requested time off, then don't even ask, because it's not going to be approved. Okay. Whereas sick now, if they have the time available, we have to let them take it. No questions asked. Okay. So if I wake up this morning and I were to call my manager and say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, I just don't feel well, and I have some time, there's nothing they can do. They're not yelling at me. They're not asking me for sick doctor's notes or letters or anything like that. Okay. That's how all of these statutes are written. So we want to keep them kind of separate. So depending on how the time is being requested, what the conversation is between employee and you, employer, then we can talk about it and figure out, how to apply it. Does it go to the vacation policy? Does it go to the sick policy? Where are we at? How do we kind of unpack this together? Okay. There is a carve out in Michigan and every other. It's usually 3 consecutive days. Okay. If you have an employee who's out for more than 3 consecutive days, what we can ask for is a return to work authorization. It's not a doctor's note, similar, right? We don't need to know what your condition is. We don't need to know where you've been or why or anything like that, right? We interact with the public. Okay, this is a restaurant. The public comes in here to eat. You work in the kitchen. You handle food. I just need to make sure that you are able to return to work without any restrictions. Okay. Maybe you had COVID. I don't know. Right. Maybe you had some other, condition. I don't know. But I just have to make sure that you're not coming in the back and affecting all of your colleagues in the back of the kitchen, contaminating food, potentially getting a customer sick. That's not going to happen. So that's why I'm asking you for just simply a return to work authorization from your physician stating, yep, Brett, he's good. He's able to return without any restrictions. That's all I need. Okay. But only after 3 consecutive days. Anything other than that, like I said, don't ask, don't tell. Okay. Moving on now to federal law. There was a lot of talk pretty much all year last year. All we kept hearing was the federal government stepping in, right? There's an executive order, President Biden stepping in, amending the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, right? The minimum wage on the federal level is very, very low. The minimum salary requirements in order to be, salary exempt is, very, very low. It's like $33,000 or something like that. We're bumping it up, right? It's been long overdue. We're making all these changes then, right between Thanksgiving and Christmas. There was a court in Texas that heard the petition, and they nullified the entire Department Department of Labor final rule. Okay, gone. Right? So what does that mean? Well, we revert back to the 2019 rule, okay, where the minimum threshold is 35,000 annually at the federal level. Okay, there are still some states, California being one of them, right? The California law doesn't change. The requirement in California is still 2 times minimum wage. Okay, minimum wage in California is $16.50, so that means $33 an hour. $69,000 is the rule. So you can see, right? California is close to double the federal rule. Okay, so if you want to pay somebody a salary in California, they have to be earning about $68,000, $69,000 annually, right? If you go, one state over in Arizona, you're at 35,000. Okay. There are some other, rules that go along with this. If you have questions, please let us know. We can go through an analysis. We can talk about your employees. What role are they performing? What are their job duties? How much are you paying them? Is there variable compensation? That's another thing. There are some rules to where you can include variable compensation. You see it a lot in a sales environment. Well, I'm not going to give this sales reps these super high base, because if they're not selling and they're not covering our expenses, then I'm losing money, right? So I'm going to give sales maybe a smaller base and then add in commission or add in bonus payments or something like that. That is acceptable. You can do something like that, but it varies by state, and there are different things that we have to kind of look at. So if that's something that you think, you might need some help with, again, please reach out. I'd be glad to have that conversation offline. We can look at the payroll records together and figure out how to help. Okay. Again, just make sure. I know a lot of people were very, very upset. I've talked to a lot of our clients that are outside of California, and they had been preparing. They had, since April of 24, they were messaging it to their employees. All right, we need to go through a salary analysis. We need to increase pay. We need to kind of look at the entire pay scale, because if we have to bump everybody up from 35 to 50, there was reclassifications. There's a lot of moving pieces that went into this, only for them to just, let the air out of the tires at the 11th hour. So if that's you, if you spent time and money going through this to prepare, and now you need to kind of walk it all back, that's something, again, that we can kind of look at and figure out how to manage it, so that we are not, upsetting our employees and making a mess. Again, that was, legislation under the previous regime. I'm not sure what the plans are just yet, but I doubt that it's going to be anywhere close to that. So if they do make some changes, there might very well, maybe. I don't believe, it's not something that's on my radar right now, but I don't think it's going to be close to double, what they were talking about last year. Again, just a quick overview. Just make sure that you're using, and look, there's no rule. I mean, if you already implemented it and you went up to the higher rate and it is what it is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with paying more. But just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page, that federal law was struck down. They might still kind of go back and forth, but for today, we're in a holding pattern. Okay. State and local requirements, most commonly minimum wage. Make sure, right? Obviously, states have their own rules, but more and more now, I'm starting to see municipalities that are popping up with their own minimum wage rules. Okay. Obviously, again, here in California, we have a laundry list. There's about 20 different cities and locations that have their own minimum wage rates that are higher than the state of California. The general rule, okay, is that it's, again, based off of where the employee lives and works. Okay. So if they live in California, right, if you are headquartered outside of California, okay, and you have an employee that lives in California, then we're now looking at the California rules. Okay. If they work in one of these municipalities that has its own wage rate, then we need to also look into that, right? It's usually most of the legislation that I've seen has a requirement of 2 hours or more per work week. Okay, so I'll just give you an easy example. Again, this doesn't apply to all 50 states, but I just wanted you to see it, and I had it come up with employers that are headquartered out east, but that have remote employees in California. Okay, if I have my office here in Orange County, California, let's say I'm in Anaheim. Okay, great. Now I'm just under the California law. I need to pay $16.50. Okay. But let's just say I have a delivery service, right? And I have an employee that's going from Anaheim into Los Angeles every day, or a few days per week, to make deliveries, to drop off things to our clients, right? Because that employee spends time in that other location, right? I need to now look at Los Angeles, which has a higher rate. Okay, I need to pay the highest of all three rates, right? Federal, state, LA, to make sure that I'm following, the rules. It gets very, very complicated, right? So if you are in one of those areas, please reach out so we can help you kind of go through that analysis and make sure that you are, following all the correct rules, right? That you don't inadvertently make a mistake and end up getting yourself sued. Okay. Again, I don't believe that there are any changes there. It could always decide tomorrow to put it back on. I would be shocked. Okay, but just keep that in mind, right? That there has been a push, there's consistently a push now to raise the rates. What I think might happen instead is, because it was struck down on the federal level, I think we'll start seeing this become a state issue. Okay, some of the states will start, bringing their own pieces of legislation to increase their own wages, their own salary exemption requirements, and or particular duties. When it comes to paying an employee's salary versus hourly. Okay. Pay transparency and reporting. This is a federal law. Several states and regions have their own, but in general, okay, the very general rule we're talking about now is we must have a documented pay scale, right, for all positions under our roof. Okay. And for the most part, it's discoverable. We don't have to post it, online anywhere. But if a current employee were to come and say, hey, hey, pay entry, what's your pay range for customer service, right? We would have to provide that information. Okay. Some states, California being the leader in this, also allow candidates to ask that during the interview process. Oh, you're bringing me on for a sales rep. I want to see your sales pay scale. Okay, and we have to show that to them in California, right? It's absurd, but that's the law out here. Okay, so what we need to do is, what they're looking for are, do we have employees, okay, that are working for us, that are performing substantially similar job duties, okay? What does that mean? Well, they use this, that substantially similar, very vague, legalese to kind of cause confusion and to open up, the back door for any plaintiff's attorney to be able to make an argument. If they're performing substantially similar job duties, then they must be getting paid the same, unless we have a bona fide business justification. Well, what the heck does that mean? Okay. Common example, okay, Brett and Jenna are both in the HR department, okay, they're both, HR consultants, they both do a lot of work with our clients and helping, people stay out ahead of the curve and proactively comply with all these laws. But Jenna gets paid, way more money than Brett. Why is that? Well, Jenna's been with the company for 10 years, and Brett just started. Okay, well, that's a bona fide business justification. Tenure, easy one. Okay, license is another one. Okay, Brett's got a law license. He's a licensed attorney. Okay, and you know what, Joe over here is not. Right, he's just brand new out of school. He's working on an HR certificate, but there's a discrepancy. Okay, one's licensed, one not. So it translates into some different, types of, employment. If you have, licensed professionals. Tenure is probably the most common. What they're looking to avoid is a situation where over time, And it happens with small businesses. Okay. I'm a small construction company, and I started off with just 5 people. It was me and my brother, and then our cousin was working for us, and then his buddy, and then another buddy, and like I took care of these guys. So over time, I was to pay them, give them a raise, give them a raise, give them a raise, and then we started hiring, employees that were outside of our family or friend scope. Like the first we did a job posting, and we found this guy here, and nobody really knew him. He wasn't related to us, wasn't part of our friend group. Well, I'm not going to give him what I'm giving that guy. That's my cousin. I'm going to give my cousin $25. I'm going to give this guy over here, just 16. All right. Well, and then over time, they're doing the same job. They've been with the company maybe for the same, or similar, tenure. And we have those types of discrepancies, and it can lead to, fair pay violations. Okay. If they are, based off of, gender or ethnicity and race and all the protected classes, that's where these cases are coming from. Right. So this is, again, part of our service. We look through the payroll registers. We want to know, who are these employees? What role are they perform? Let's look at all of your sales reps. Are they all getting paid the same? Let's look at all of our customer service representatives. Are they getting paid the same? All of our serving staff, all of our back of the house kitchen staff. Is everybody in line? Right? Do we have a pay scale that we can document? Right? We can help you do it manually. We also have a partner of ours that has a very, very cool piece of software that will help us accomplish a lot of this. Okay, it's probably one of the best I've ever seen in my 15 years. We're blessed to have them, be a part of our pay entry family. But the HR Performance Pro folks are tremendous, and if you haven't seen what they have to offer, again, let me know, and we can set up a quick call, and you can look at that to see if, hey, we've got a lot of moving pieces. We've got people in different states. We've got 100 or plus employees, and doing all this by hand is going to be nauseating. I might need to rely on the piece of software instead. No problem. We can help you make that determination. Okay. Obviously on the federal level, the aim is to close the gender pay gap and create more equitable workplaces, right? Require companies to disclose in the job postings, in these pay gap reports, full transparency. That way there's no issues, okay? Again, if this is something that you're like kind of unsure of, if you haven't heard about this yet and you're like, oh man, how do I do it? Just reach out. This is something that we do all day, right? We're very equipped to be able to manage this for you. It's not painless it's not painful, I should say, for us, because this is part of our process. Okay. Another recap, right? The pay equity audit, and this goes again in line with the other audit, right? So our what we call HR audit covers all of these things. It's not just it's just pay equity audit and then inequality. No, our audit is all encompassing. Those of you on the call here today that have gone through it, can attest to that. It's very thorough. It covers all of these things at once, so that we don't have to keep coming back and doing it over and over and over again. Okay. Lastly here, before we open up for questions, remote work policies. In general, okay, there are different states, again, that have different rules, okay? Employee rights, workplace safety, data protection. In general, what I wanted to make sure of is that we cover this, okay? If you have somebody working remotely, okay, there needs to be a kind of a checklist of a process. What state are they located in? Okay. Do we have an employer tax account to pay taxes in that state? Because you must, right? This is another thing that people screw up. Oh, well, it's just Arizona. It's just right across the river there. No, we can't pay California taxes, right, to an employee that lives in Arizona. The state of Arizona needs to be involved, and we have to have a tax account set up there. Okay, so for the most part, there needs to be an analysis. Is this even worth hiring remote employees in some of these states that have a laundry list of all these requirements? I know all 50 states. I can easily help you with that. So if you're on the fence, hey man, we really need to hire this employee. Man, the resume looks good. He's up in Wyoming. What do I need to know? Okay, well, yeah, no problem, right? Very, very easy to work with. Not a huge barrier to entry. Let's go. Colorado, different story. Huge pain to deal with the state of Colorado. They don't make life easy for employers. Colorado and Washington are the two states, in my experience level, expertise, a lot of curveballs, a lot of red tape might not be worth hiring remote employees in those two states. Okay. All right. From there, what's the work that's going to be performed? Okay. We need to have very clear scope of what we expect to be done, right? The business hours from 8 to 5, just like everybody else, right? You don't just work whenever you want. You're not up in the middle of the night answering emails. Then, during the day when our clients are calling, you're off, spending time with your kids or playing golf or something else. There needs to be a bunch of different rules. Data protection is another one. Equipment, okay? We have employees say, oh, well, I don't have a camera on my thing. Well, no, all of our client calls, you're expected to be on camera ready, engaging with our customers. So you can't work from home if you don't have this piece of equipment and you don't have a camera and you're not going to be camera ready, or you get, poor service. And every time you're on the phone, the Zoom is restarting and people can't hear you because you've got a bad signal. That's not going to work for us. So we need to put these clear controls in place. So that way, if there are any violations or any issues, we can then simply revoke, the work from home type, policy. I'm sorry, you're going to have to come into the office. Okay. Or, if it's fully remote and it's not like a hybrid, we're going to talk about all this stuff beforehand. Do you have this? Do you have that? How can we do this? How can we test all of these things to make sure that we're not getting ourselves in a situation to where we're bringing on a remote employee and we don't really have oversight for them because they're in another state and we can't really, talk to them and they're not performing, and now I've got a huge mess and I've got to let somebody go, and I really don't want to deal with it. So again, we want to make sure that we're offering, support, that they understand that we're it's almost as like they're in the office but they're at home. Same setup. We're going to give them the laptops. We're going to give them all the equipment that they need. We're going to, communicate with them and hear. We're going to, check in every week or every other day and inspect the results. So that way, if things start kind of going left, we can address that just as if something was going sideways with somebody who's here in the office. We could have that conversation too. You really shouldn't know that there's any difference except for they're not sitting next to you. Okay. Tax is another one. I've had this happen a lot. Well, so-and-so, I didn't realize, but they left the country. They've been working, on a beach in Mexico, or they went to Europe and they've been just remoting in. Well, if you're okay with that, then that's okay. But you need to understand that, from an IT perspective, there are different rules. There's different safeguards that you want to put in place to protect your data and your info. Tax is going to be the biggest one. I'm not a tax expert, but again, if you have people that are going to be spending, periods of time, outside of the United States, there may be some tax implications that you want to smooth out beforehand. Okay, if it's just, I'm going on a week vacation, not a problem. But you know what, my family's relocating, I'm going to remote in from England. We're probably going to want to hit, time out for a second and really unpack this to figure out how we can lay that groundwork, and because we don't want any surprises. We don't want any other countries or any other agencies upset with us or coming after us because we've got employees working and we're not paying taxes. We're not following their work authorization rules. Okay. Compliance calendar, again, I will leave this up. Do we have any questions while we still have a few minutes left? This is just some overview as to what I wanted you guys to look at, just to kind of get your wheels turning a little bit, right? Tax deposits, benefits open enrollment, ACA reporting if you're offering insurance. Just some things to kind of get you thinking, like, am I good? Do I need some support? Where do we go from here? First question here. Can you ask for a valid ID? Yes, as part of your hiring process, yes, you would ask for that, but not until an offer is made, right? That's, the in most states, the offer is kind of the legal mechanism now to put all of this red tape behind us and be able to now step in and start getting to the bottom of everything, right? We can ask about, we can negotiate wages, we can talk about, start dates, we can get all the documentation once the offer is made. We don't want to ask for these things before then, because there's a high likelihood that we might be, getting ourselves in hot water. Okay. Next question here. Let's see. When the vacation and sick pay are separate, right, it penalizes healthy employees. Healthy employees miss less work. Healthy employees are forced to lie about time away or work more. No, not necessarily. I don't think so. I think the time is there. Okay, what you can choose to do as the employer, if you want to let somebody use a sick day, you can let them use a sick day, right? I'm not necessarily focused on the healthy, the productive employees. It's the serial repeat offenders that we are going to be able to stay out ahead of, right? Hey, look, keep calling off. I keep calling off. I keep calling off. All right, that's great. Well, guess what? You've already used all of your sick. Okay, you've used all of your sick. You don't have any vacation, or you do have vacation, but you're not using it because you didn't follow the request process. So you have you don't have any choice, right? You're taking a day unpaid, and as soon as they have to start taking days unpaid, I've seen in my experience that a lot of the behaviors then start to change. Okay, that it's like, oh, all right, well, yeah, what? I'm not going to do that anymore, because if I keep letting them, just use a vacation, use a vacation, use a vacation, and we reward that behavior, then a lot of the times it continues to kind of rear its head and we lose control over the process. That's a great question. And again, if you've had different circumstances and you have a different experience, I'd love to hear about it so we can talk about it together and kind of troubleshoot. I'll stay on, guys. I know we've hit our 1 hour. If you need to jump off and tackle the rest of your day, my feelings won't be hurt. You can go ahead and jump off, but I've got time. I don't mind staying on here for just a few more minutes to answer some of these other questions. All right. Can we still require at least 2 hours for sick? Yes. Most of the legislation will allow you. So if you're going to take sick, it's going to be a minimum. You're not just going to I came in late, so let me use 15 minutes of sick. No. Okay. We can say, hey, it's got to be a 2-hour minimum. It's going to be a 4-hour minimum of sick. Some states have different requirements, but that is a tool that we can utilize. We can say, if you are using sick, that it must be used in 2-hour increments and 4-hour increments. Okay. Same thing with a vacation policy. You can do that as well. All right. Let's see here. Our employees do not handle food, but there is a threat that they may get others sick. We don't require a doctor's note since it can be difficult to get an appointment. Obviously, we accept the notes when provided, but this requirement can put a financial burden on the employee and may delay his or her return for a piece of paper. I mean, look, that is up to you. Okay, 3 or more days. Okay, is usually the requirement. You don't have to. You don't have to require that, but it is usually what happens, right? After it's 1 day, no, we're not going to put them through the ringer in a 1 day, situation. But a lot of the times now with teledoc and a lot of online resources, and if they were truly sick to where they couldn't make it to work for 3 days, and it all comes down to the communication that you're having with the employee. The employee's like, no, I'm not sick. I'm just, not coming in. Okay, well, it is what it is. Then we won't ask for a return to work. I just wanted you to understand that if it is for 3 days or more and you do interact with the public, you may ask for that as a way to protect yourselves, your customers, and your other employees. All right. Extreme weather conditions, when your business is shut down for a few days, that's up to you. There are no laws, there's no rules that you have to, offer compensation in those situations. Obviously, you might want to, because if you're in a situation, you're in a state where there's extreme weather and there needs to be a shutdown, and you're continuously shutting down and not paying, then you might lose some of your better people. Again, you can say, hey, look, you know what, you have sick, we'll let you apply the sick. You have vacation, we'll let you apply the vacation. Or we can work together some emergency, you know, weather pay, right? We'll give you a little bucket, right? On days to where the snow, you know, we're piling snow and we can't come to work, you know, we'll give you a couple snow days, or we'll you know, use similar to the holiday pay, right? There's no right or wrong answer to that. You don't have to, but it might be a good idea to tackle that if it's continuously happening to you, and you are hearing some kind of pushback from the employees if they're not happy with that. Okay. Let's see. Pay scale. If you base the pay scale based off a tenure, you know, 1 to 2 years, you know, it's 55 to 60K, but then 3 to 5 years. You know, how do you, so what that's called is wage compression. Wage compression is a whole different, you know, other uh, can of worms, right? You know, we have a different range here, and then we have, you know, other. What I would do, and there's a couple of other questions based off of this. We'll just talk about it in general real quick, and I think I might be able to answer 3 questions at once. When it gets to the salary range, you know, I don't necessarily change it based off of years, but productivity. Okay, I say the salary for this role is 55 to 62. Okay, and how do I determine it? It's based off of productivity. Okay, it doesn't matter how long you've been. If you've been with us for 2 weeks, but you're one of the best, and I can already tell, then maybe I'll pay you at the top half of the range. Now, yeah, somebody who's been there for 5 years that's only getting 60 is going to get their feelings hurt. But you know what? As long as it's clearly drafted and we understand, you know, what the rules are, then you don't have a legal issue. And if you're mentioning it, you're probably not going to have the HR issue, because people are going to understand how it works and how to get there. And if they want to push themselves, they want to apply themselves, they'll be able to get there on their own. Another thing that people do is they create tiers. You build in tiers. So another one of the questions that was on here is about, you know, well, what happens if, you know, we get, you know, somebody who's, you know, if they just started, or I was recruiting them and they kind of came in and they're already asking for the top half of the pay scale. We can create, you know, level 1, customer service level 1, customer service level 2, customer service level 3. Everybody starts off at a level 1 at 55, period. Okay, then here's what needs to happen in order to get to the level 2. Okay, if you're able to do these 3 things, then you automatically get bumped up to level 2. Doesn't matter how long you've been here. There's no timetable on it. But a process like that is usually the most fair. It will blend in with all of the, you know, state and federal rules, and you're not going to have any issues, because it's not unlawful, and it's easy to explain when we draft it for you. So everybody's usually on the same page. All right. So we got one more here. California, you know, sick pay, when we're talking about use it or lose it, that's a great question. Usually what happens, okay, is if it is an accrual, if it is a sick accrual, it is not use it or lose it. You cannot have it a use it or lose it accrual. If there's time left over, then they have to be able to carry it to the next year. But we can always cap the usage. Okay, you can have an unlimited amount in your bucket, but you're only going to be able to use 40 per year. Okay, California allows for the sick pay to be paid up front. Okay, some states do, some states don't. If your state allows for sick to be paid up front, then it's usually you can have a use it or lose it. We're going to give you all 40 up front, and we're just going to reset it every January. Okay, so anything left over, sorry, we're going to wipe it out, and we start over 40, 40, 40, 40 every year, and it goes from there. Okay. All right, let's see. Take time for one more question here. Okay. Compliance for exempt and non-exempt. It was brought to our attention today that non-exempt employees in Massachusetts must be paid bi-weekly rather than semi-monthly. Yeah, so specifically, I don't know that rule off the top of my head. I can look into it for you, but yes, each state has its own rules when it comes to compensation, right? State of California, you must pay all employees at least twice per month. Okay, you can't pay a non-owner employee monthly in California. Some states you can, right? It might not be the best. You might make people angry and they'll quit, but it's not unlawful to pay employees just once per month in some states. Okay, so there's a lot of different curveballs, and again, that's what we're here for. Okay, we're here to help you. If any questions, right? But these are the things that we would kind of flush out in that audit overview. Okay, hey, what kind of you have salary versus hourly? How much are you paying them? When are you paying them? Let's look at all these things. And then we can kind of pick this up and unpack it all and help you understand if there's any other risk. And I think Lorena, she's putting there in the chat, our email address. Send us an email. We're glad to jump on the call. You can also book a 10-15 minute just quick call with us. We can talk through any of these other questions that you might have. But again, I thank you for your time. Thank you for the questions. I appreciate you all for joining me on this Tuesday. Have a great rest of your day and a great week, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.